it looks so much from the outside as if I don't do anything. When actually on the inside, I feel like I want to do so much that I'm literally just drowning in it. And I know that this relates with so many people, that we get so super excited about so many things and we want to do it all. And we have constantly also new ideas and different projects, and then we want to try a new routine and different habits, and there's all these different ambitions. And on one hand, it's of course super nice to get excited by so many things and to want to do so much, but when you then actually don't do any of it, it's kind of a problem. And I was really like, this cannot continue, because it's just really also a total pattern that I can see in my life, that I just end up then in this complete paralysis, where I literally don't get anything done and where I feel like completely paralyzed. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna research now what is actually going on here. And of course, also what can I do about this? How can I change this? And I want to share with you first and foremost that the main thing I realized is that it has nothing to do with willpower or discipline or like being able to follow through with things, but it's actually several things at play here. And the main thing is that it's a total brain problem. So I want to explain to you kind of what happens here on a neurological level, and then of course how we can change this, because we can fix it. So basically the first thing that happens when we want to do a lot of different things is something called cognitive overload. So our prefrontal cortex, which is the area directly behind our forehead, is the area responsible for planning, for decision making, prioritizing, also for impulse control. And this area has kind of a limited capacity. So you can imagine it as if a computer has 20 tabs open, 20 different things that you want to do and that you think about. And the system is just really working super hard here, right, to run all of these different tabs. And it's just getting tired and fatigued. So it slows down. And it just ends up making us then give up or scroll or just do something else, procrastinate, because it just cannot handle that kind of mental load or kind of this cognitive overload. And this is super related to a concept that I'm so sure you've already heard about, which is the paradox of choice, or also called the Hick's law, which was the study that found that the more options we have, the slower our decision making gets, or also the harder it gets. So it was this jam experiment where they tested how much people buy when they're testing different jams. And there was, I don't remember, like either 5 different jams or 20 different jams that they could try. And when it was only 5 different kinds of jam, they bought much more than when it was 20 different flavors, because the more there is to try, the harder it just gets for our brain to figure out what is now the right decision to take. And it's just so much energy that the brain then has to use on making any decision. And now something else that completely blew my mind, that there's a huge difference between wanting something and doing something, especially in terms of dopamine. Because dopamine is often called the pleasure molecule, but actually what it does is that it creates wanting, it creates desire. And so when we have a new idea and we start dreaming about it and fantasizing and planning, we release dopamine because it activates that wanting and that desire. But again, wanting and doing something are 2 completely different brain circuits. And so you can be super high on motivation and super high on excitement for an idea, but then the dopamine is kind of already fully spent on that, especially when we share it with other people, when we talk about it and when we go into that planning mode. And I think we often also realize that the planning is oftentimes so much fun and like really the easy part and where all that excitement comes up. But that is literally where we kind of like waste, so to say, all the dopamine, because then we come to the doing phase. There's no real dopamine left, and it gets maybe also repetitive and the same and gets hard. And there's just no excitement in it anymore. And then what happens is that the brain comes up with something else that all of a sudden seems super exciting. And this is actually called the shiny object syndrome, when we constantly come up with something else that we find super exciting and the other thing gets boring, because of how much our brain loves novelty and how much it thrives on that, and again how much dopamine it releases and how exciting it is. So every time the current project starts to get hard or boring and that novelty washes off, the brain immediately starts to look for something else. And the big problem about this is especially also that every time we then give in to that and we just quit whatever we were working on and we move on to the next thing, we kind of also reinforce that pattern, and it gets stronger and stronger, right? Because all the neurons that kind of wire together repeatedly, they fire together so much stronger. So that neural pathway also gets so much stronger in the brain. But what I think is actually by far the biggest problem at play here, 1,000% for me, like, I'm so annoyed by this, is perfectionism. And not in the cute way, oh, I like to do everything so perfect, but no, really in a flaw way, because it just really is a flaw. When you do not complete something or do not put something out because you feel like it's not good enough, that is such a huge thing holding you back. And I cannot tell you how much it frustrates me that I just notice it again and again, how perfectionistic I am. Best example also, there was no episode last week because it wasn't like that I didn't have the time or that something happened or anything. But basically, I spent so much time going back and forth between 3 different topics, and then I couldn't decide, and then I postponed it, and then I procrastinated on it. And then I thought, okay, I'll just go with this one now. I did record a full episode actually, and I felt like, oh my God, it's so not good. I cannot upload this. It's not good enough. And basically, ending up not doing anything. There was no new episode. Yeah, it's a huge problem. And it's just this expectation towards ourselves also. I think definitely one huge reason is social media, because we just constantly see how well and how amazing it's going for everyone else. And even more so, I feel like we never really see where someone else started. We kind of only see the perfect end result, or also the struggles behind things, or the more behind the scenes. I mean, sometimes we do see it, but I would say in most cases we don't really, and we don't see the failed attempts and the things that do not get uploaded and so on, right? We only see what is there. And oftentimes that's just very perfect. And then we automatically compare ourselves to that, and we feel like, okay, that's the standard and that's what we need to strive for. And I also really so strongly believe that it's basically fear of failing in disguise. It's basically the exact same, because we're just so afraid of not being good enough and of failing, right? And of what the consequence of that might be, and what internal feeling it also creates within us, right? Because I feel like failing is such a hard feeling to deal with and can feel so scary, and just the most often, I would guess, the number one thing why people don't do the thing they want to do, because they're so afraid of not being good enough at it. And then it's just this total spiral. And it's also really closely connected to the fact that we so often have totally unrealistic expectations towards ourselves. Again, I think because we look up to other people and we feel like, okay, that's how it's done and that's how it's supposed to be, without taking into consideration that everything takes time and that we cannot expect of ourselves to do everything perfect from the get-go, but that we need to allow ourselves to be bad at something first, because you have to be bad in the beginning to become better later. And especially this gap of where we are and where we feel like we have to be is also what paralyzes us so much and what holds us so much back from doing the things we want to do, and then ending up not doing any of it. But what I do think is also really interesting and important to remember is that whenever our nervous system is overwhelmed, and it just does get overwhelmed if we have too many ideas and too high expectations, too much we think we should be doing and we want to do also, when it gets overwhelmed, it can either go into the fight or flight mode, but the third mode that I feel like is so often forgotten about is the freeze mode. So where we then just literally feel like, oh, we cannot do anything. Where we then reach for the phone, we scroll, we seek that quick reward or some simple pleasure, to not be confronted with just this feeling of not being good enough, not knowing where to start, and just this crazy overwhelm, right? And then we interpret that as having no energy, no willpower, being lazy. But it's actually our nervous system saying, this is too much. We cannot do this. And so these are kind of basically all the problems at play here. But the very good news is that there is a fix for all of them. So let me talk you through them now, step by step. And probably the hardest thing is the very first thing, which is that we have to realize we simply cannot do it all. It's not possible. We have to choose one thing, and then we fully focus on that one thing, putting all our attention and focus there. And of course, the biggest question, and also the hardest question by far, is okay, but so what is that one thing, especially if there are so many things that I want to do? I have no idea like what to focus on. And there, the best question to ask yourself, in my opinion, is if you imagine yourself as your 80-year-old self, thriving, living their best life, hopefully, what do you think that version of yourself, if they look back to your life, what would they regret that you didn't do? What would they be like, oh my God, why did you not do that? This would have been amazing. This would have changed your life. This would have been incredible. And really thinking about like, what would be something that I would so deeply regret if I didn't do it? There's also this Brianna Weiss quote that I absolutely love. It's one of my favorite quotes. And it says that all you will regret is not reaching harder for the things that you wanted while they were still in front of you. So maybe also asking yourself, what is something I really want to do that I kind of can maybe only do now, or that now would be a really good time to do this, and maybe if I postpone it, it wouldn't be as easy anymore, or I don't know. Like, for example, for me, the whole topic around starting a podcast, oh my God, I cannot tell you for how long I've been wanting to do it. And I did actually, I don't think I've mentioned this before in this podcast, but I did have a podcast in the past. So I think it was 2019 where I was doing it, and I enjoyed it so much, but I somehow got so demotivated because it wasn't really growing, and I didn't feel like it's going anywhere, and I was putting so much effort into it, and so I stopped. But it somehow didn't let me go. I was really like, oh, I loved it so much and I would love to do it again, but yeah, I didn't then really somehow have the courage to pick it up again, and was doubting myself and all of these things. But then really this quote and just this thought about, I think I would regret not trying it again. And also that now is still a really good time to do it, because I do have the time to do it and kind of the capabilities at the moment. And I don't know how it will be in a few years, right? And I also don't know what the podcasting space will look like in a few years. Will there even still be podcasts? We don't know, right? So I was really like, okay, it's kind of right in front of me. So if I don't grab for it now and just give it a try, I am going to regret it. And so I think this is really such a powerful way to figure out what should you focus on and what should you really also commit to. And then once you do commit to it, give yourself really also kind of maybe a time frame or some personal contract with it that you are really going for it and giving it a try, no matter what it is. Being really like, I'm gonna focus fully on this one thing now. And it's not that it has to be like this forever, right? It's about having this one thing now, and then once it's maybe working or you're in a good rhythm with it, then we can focus on something else or add something else to it. But we really have to remember how powerful it is to be focused, to have a focus. It's insane what a huge difference it makes. And I think also when you look at the most successful people, oftentimes the thing that they are successful at is like the main thing that they do. Very often they don't do a million different things, or if they do, then very likely they have a big team behind them. But they got good at what they're doing because that was their number one obsession, and it was all they did all day long. And that's kind of like how they got there. So we need to make sure we decide on that one thing. And we also try our best to avoid any distractions. This is definitely my number one job to do. I'm actually always mind blown how easily I get distracted, and it's horrible. It's really insane that I feel like I'm working on something and I have a thought, and immediately I'm like, oh yeah, I should Google this. And then I Google it, and then I get, of course, completely sidetracked by something else. And then something happens here, then I get a message, and I'm completely forgot what was I even doing, right? That's just insane. But I guess that it's like that for so many people, right? Because we are living in a distraction world where everything is constantly also competing for our attention, right? And attention is basically the most valuable resource. And that's also why we need to protect it at all costs. And so whatever takes away from your focus and from your attention should be removed. So definitely removing the phone when you're working on something, or reducing notifications. Or also what I really find super helpful is setting a timer when I'm working on something, to really make sure that this time that is running right now here on my timer is dedicated only on the things that I said I'm going to work on. And I'm not going to spend it on anything else. And I'm not going to allow my focus to wander. And yeah, because if we also switch between tasks constantly, it's crazy what it does to our productivity, because the brain uses so much energy also on the switching and focusing from one thing to the next thing and so on. So yeah, but I mean, I'm saying this and I swear to you, I'm like, it's still my main struggle. So I really need to work on this. Something else we need to learn is to get comfortable with boring. Because like we talked about with the shiny object syndrome, every new project and new idea is going to lose its spark once the novelty wears off. And with every single thing where you make progress, there comes this part where it's just repetitive, where it's boring, where there's nothing exciting, nothing new. But that is where the progress is going to happen, because we stick with it and we go through that part. And especially hard is it when it's something where you don't really see results that quickly, right? And where it maybe takes a lot of time, because I think actually when you then do see results and when you do see the progress, that's then super motivating, right? And that just actually then keeps you going more. But with so many things, it just does take time, right? And that's then exactly though where the most people quit, right? Before you actually do see the results, because you feel like it's not working and you're giving it so much and it is so boring and it is so hard. And the brain literally tries also to pull you away because of the dopamine, because it wants the new, it wants the exciting. And it's just like, oh, why are we still doing this, right? Let's move on. And it's actually really such a phenomenon also. It also has a name, but I forgot right now what it's called. But it's like next to the shiny object syndrome. It's something where you're like starting something and then you actually oftentimes also have different expectations of it. So I think that's really interesting that so often we think, when we hear something or we think about something, that it's super glamorous and super exciting. But when you then actually look at the day-to-day work, especially I would say with job titles, right? Some job titles sound so amazing and so exciting. And exactly also, I would say the feeling of having the job title seems exciting, right? But when you then actually look into, okay, but what does it mean every single day of doing this job? It oftentimes is not that glamorous, right? And it's really hard oftentimes. And so it's really the difference of how does it look from the outside, and kind of what is the elevator speech to compare to what does it mean day to day and what is the actual work that needs to be done. And there, I think it's also super important to actually do commit to something, right? And try things out for a longer period of time to really figure out, what do I actually enjoy and do I actually really like this or not? And then definitely at the same time, also allowing yourself, when you really realize, okay, it's not the shiny object syndrome. I genuinely do not like this and I thought it would be completely different and I don't enjoy this. So then of course also allow yourself to quit. We don't want to just keep dragging on when we clearly know, okay, this is not right. But I guess there we just need to be super intuitive also, right? And really realize, okay, is this now because I'm just bored, or is it because I genuinely kind of hate what I'm doing here, right? But I do guess most often it has to do that we don't want to deal with the boring part, and there come new ideas that excite us, and deciding in those moments that it's not about that these ideas are never going to be done, but maybe putting them in kind of like a parking list. So in a parking position where it's like, it's a great idea, it excites me, but not now, not right now. It needs to wait. We have something else to work on right now, even if it's not as exciting. Let's actually quickly come back to the whole part around the cognitive overload, because in that regard, something I have so learned for myself is how powerful routines are and how much they do help with reducing any cognitive overload if we have fixed routines, if we have pre-made decisions, because it's really insane how much energy our brain needs to spend on making certain decisions. And that's why it can be so beneficial with certain things to decide in advance. For example, planning our next day in advance, deciding exactly what you're going to focus on, deciding what you're going to wear, what you're going to eat, so that we do not get overwhelmed with all these decisions. I realized this so crazy much over the last years whenever we would move and travel and just kind of be all over. that it would be such a struggle for me every day to be like, okay, we're in a new hotel, in a new city. What do I focus on today? What do I actually do? And where am I going to get food later? And what am I going to do? Just, it's been so tough mentally of, being productive, literally, because the brain needs to deal with so many different decisions that it just has no capacity anymore to actually get some work done. And so whatever we can do in our daily life to reduce decisions, we should definitely do. And routines in general are actually so beneficial also for our mental health. They give so much stability and security. I do think I also talked about it last week. No, not last week, 2 weeks ago. But so, routines definitely for the win. But now another really important question: what can we actually do about the whole perfectionism problem? When you don't do something because you feel like it's not good enough, when you keep holding yourself back. And there, what I'm really trying to do is to just lower the bar for myself and lower my standards and my expectations, and remember this phrase that done is always better than perfect, or 90% done is better than 100% not done, or something like that. So that we will always make more progress by doing something and it's not perfect, instead of just not doing it at all, because we don't get anything from that, right? We don't get any experience from it or feedback from it or any kind of learning from it. So we need to allow ourselves to be bad at something, and it's so tough. It's so difficult, right? Because it just does really also put us in a vulnerable position, and we also do have standards for ourselves, right? And expectations. But I think always reminding ourselves that everyone had to start somewhere and no one was great at the beginning. And also, to me, I really love also, for example, when you look at artists and you compare their very beginnings with where they are now, and just seeing also how much someone grew and how much someone improved, and really remembering that. And also all these stories about how often people failed before they were successful, right? And that it took all these failures to get them to that success, that if they would have never failed, they would have never gotten to that point, right? And that there something like overnight success also basically really does not exist. I think I really loved the example with Sabrina Carpenter. I thought it was so exciting when she just literally exploded. Was it last year? I think so, where she got so super crazy mega famous, right? And where I feel like most people didn't know for how crazy many years she had been making music and how hard she had been working just tirelessly over years and years and years. And that's exactly why she ended up where she was, because it also took that time to maybe prepare her for that success and to turn her into that artist, or like to become that artist that she is now. And it was kind of all building up to that. And so we also always want to think of we're preparing for opportunity. And it's kind of really like a playground where we are. And just in general, that brings me to a whole different concept, but this mindset around that life is a game, and that trying something new, really seeing it from a game perspective, and that we're starting at level 1, right? And we're working our way up, and it's not that serious also. And that's really something I would love to integrate into my mind so much more, to not overthink things too much, to not take things so seriously, and to really always remember it really doesn't matter that much. In the big scheme of things, it really doesn't matter so much. So we should not be too hard on ourselves. We should not hold ourselves back. We should just try and literally not give a shit because it really doesn't matter, right? But I, of course, know this is always a lot easier said than done. But anyways, let's continue, because something else I find really helpful, especially when I'm in this complete paralysis state where I'm like, I don't even know where to start and I don't even know what I'm doing, is to just think about what is the smallest thing that I can actually do with a project that I've been thinking about. So, for example, where I always get like so crazy overwhelmed is with my YouTube videos, when I want to start editing them, because I'm just like, oh my God, I filmed so much. It's so many different files. I first need to organize them, and then I need to start. And I just know that it's such a huge project that it just completely overwhelms me, and that I procrastinate on it so crazy much, because I'm just literally like, I don't know where to start. It's so much. And there I'm just trying to set myself these little tasks where I'm like, okay, today the only thing you're going to do is that you create the Final Cut Pro file and you put all the files into that one folder. And that's the only thing you do today. And just kind of really breaking it up into these tiny steps. It could also be if you want to start working out regularly, to be like, okay, I'm going to do 5 minutes, no longer, on my yoga mat today. I'm going to roll up my mat, I'm going to do 5 minutes. Or same thing with running consistently, going for runs. You say, I'm only going to run for 1 kilometer. I'm not allowed to run more. And then just doing that, and then realizing that the hardest part really is to get started. That's really where the brain kind of needs to use most capacity. And then once we're over that point, it does get so much easier from there. And it's literally just kind of reframing it in our mind to make that start less overwhelming and a lot smaller, so it doesn't require so much for us to actually do get started. And we're going to realize, okay, it's actually not that hard, because so often it's so much harder in our brain than it is in reality. So we kind of really have to trick ourselves a little bit there. And now the last thing I wanted to share with you is that we probably also need to redefine what progress looks like for us, because I really noticed that I felt like in order to feel like I'm making progress and I'm doing the best I can, that I had to do it all, and that I had to feel like I'm progressing in all areas. And instead, realizing that progress is, even if I only make it in one single area, that's already amazing. And it's actually not just progress, but it's also focus. So for example, if I now make consistent podcast episode, but maybe I'm not as consistent with going to the gym or posting on Instagram or whatever, I'm still making progress. And it shows that I'm just focusing more on one thing right now, and I'm dedicating more to that now. And so reframing that for myself and realizing that the goal is not to do everything. It's to do one thing so well that it changes my entire life. Because then we do one thing, and then the next thing, and then slowly over time we create the life that we've always been dreaming about, kind of really one step at a time, focusing on one specific thing at a time. So yeah, I really hope that this episode helped you wherever you are right now. Definitely let me know in the comments. And also if you have any tips or any learnings or anything that helped you, I would love to hear it. Also, if there's anyone that you feel like could resonate with this episode as well, please send it to them. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. I can't wait to see you soon. Bye.